Yo, what's up guys? Todd from zeotag.com, and today's episode has me hyped up. We've had a lot of great guests, but I think today was the most fun I've had recording and riffing with our guest, who is a crazy expert on video and audio podcasting. So if you're questioning if your video content strategy is actually going to lead to business success because you're not quite sure yet, if you wish your audience was chomping at the bit for more of your content, if you need a way to tell if you're on the right track, if you need some tools to use or frameworks to implement for faster results, then this episode is for you. Today's guest is Charlie Valor of valormedia.com, and he's currently helping clients generate over 1 million downloads per month. So this guy has the oversight to see what's working, what's not working, who it's working for. Most importantly, he's got the data to back it up and the insights to why and how you can use those insights to make better content for yourself. And in this episode, we go deep on what you can do to plan, produce, promote, and profit from your video and audio content strategy. He will actually put up his profit per subscriber up against anyone in the world. So this is definitely a guy that you want to listen to and learn from. I could rattle off 30 more bullet points of value that we touch on, but I don't want to keep you waiting that long to get started. The last thing I'll say before we dive in is that if you want to enhance your videos or podcasts with a new player that will make searching and navigating your video library and individual episodes a seamless experience for your audience, head over to zeotag.com right now and sign up for a free account. Now, without further ado, here is my episode with Charlie. All right, Charlie, thank you so much for joining the show. Really appreciate you coming on. So to kick things off, why don't we just talk about, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, great opening question. So I'm Charlie. I'm the founder of Valor Media, and the way I like to think of myself is I'm like Chief Podcasting Officer, so CPO, invented a new role.
I like that.
And really what it means is that I'm a person that was addicted to podcasting and found a knack for it, and then eventually it became a business for me. So prior history before starting Valor Media, which is a podcasting media company or an agency of podcasting, I suppose we call it, is I had a lot of experience in outsourcing and a digital agency. So how it kind of came to be, or like how I ended up in this podcasting game, is that I was working on a business and we were really struggling at this point. So this is probably like 3 or 4 years ago. We were trying to grow this company and we hit this curve where it was like the cost of traffic was just going up dramatically. So we were doing things like Facebook ads and Google ads, and it was like this curvature of like every week it was like, wow, we're spending more and we're getting less.
Yeah.
Then even on the other side of that, we're a company that was relying on phone sales and having consultations, and like our show up rates were just going through the floor.
Yeah.
So there's this curvature going on, and I don't know if anyone can see me. For the audio listener, just imagine this plex, and the video, of course, you can see it was like this curve, and we hit this line where I was like, holy shit, like we're actually not going to be profitable to acquire clients. Like we're going to be paying clients for them to come on board. And the alarm bells started going off. I was like, like what are we going to do here? And I remember distinctly, I went on this walk and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the idea that, once upon a time it was a good idea to have an ad in the yellow pages.
Yeah.
And then I had a great business in the era of 1 cent clicks on AdWords. Mm-hmm. And then the early days of Facebook, I was like, it was cream. It was absolute cream.
Yeah.
It was really, really good times. And I'm like, things are hitting a changing point again. Like the internet is getting more serious, and I think I need to adapt. Now, of course, I know people are still killing it on AdWords and Facebook today, but I'm very much saying for me in this moment, we just didn't have maybe the skills or the knowledge, or there was something there that found it not working for us. But I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of people that used to get great results on these platforms just don't anymore. So I'm on this walk, right? I'm going up the hill. Because it's beautiful. I live in a nice hilly, leafy area, and I'm walking up this hill and I'm just thinking about it. And then this question popped in my head. I was like, when was the last time you bought anything from a Facebook ad and getting on a sales call? I was like, I haven't.
Yeah.
Like, it's been years. And I'm like, well, why are you expecting other people to do so?
Right.
It seems obvious when I say it like this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, you haven't stopped spending money. There's not a pile of cash at your house that's gone unspent. You know what I mean? Like, how are you buying things? And I looked around in my life and I was like, so even in this moment, I can look in this room and go, the podcast equipment I use was recommended on a podcast. Huh. The monitor I have was recommended on a podcast. All the books I've been buying is often I hear the author on a podcast and I buy them.
Yeah, same.
So I really looked not so much at like, what was available. And I love that you said the same, because it sounds like you're already preaching to the converted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I very much had this aha moment of going, I buy everything off podcasts.
Yeah.
So we did this kind of move from here of shifting this business from just being focused on direct response and direct ads, and said we are a content marketing business now. Yeah. And we went deep into doing a video podcast. And it was a home run. Like, it was an absolute home run. And over the space of 6 months, this was a fantastic turnaround. And this business wouldn't be around today if we didn't do it.
Yeah.
On the back of that, though, people started coming up to me and friends started saying, oh, that podcast thing you did? Can you do that for me? Like, we want to do a podcast. And I'm like, it started as I was just kind of helping friends out. And then before you know it, it got serious enough where Vela Media, which is the company today, needed to become its own company. And then if you fast forward a little bit today, we've got more than 20 staff. We look after a number of shows and we build shows with clients, both video shows and audio shows itself. And I suppose I don't want to say the rest is history, because it's certainly not. It's been a fun and interesting journey on the way. But my addiction to podcasts and using them as a growth engine for a business has remained the same.
Yeah. So I'm kind of the same. Like, I'm heavy content marketing, but I do like to integrate paid amplification for that content and mix everything together and really diversify. But talk to me about I'll tell you where I find podcasting, like this show, is really about, we'll embed this into a blog post and optimize that blog post for search engines. And then we'll run paid social traffic to the blog post content, which will then, lead into a funnel. But I'm not relying on just publishing a podcast episode as a way people will discover me. So are you using podcast episodes as a way for people to find you, or in a different part of the kind of customer journey? And how have you kind of found that working for you?
Yeah, really good question. And this is something I think about a lot, to be honest. If you're at a stage where you think you can just make a podcast and someone's going to find it, it's probably not going to happen. Like, those days are gone. 10 years ago, the people who got on iTunes, good on you. Well done. But these days are really, really gone. And I'll tell you how I've approached it. Really, podcasting is just a form of content. So we could say video is a form of content. We could say that blogs are a form of content. Like, it's an audio predominantly, some video, but majority that type of format. Now, where I think people aren't thinking about podcasting in the same way, and you've kind of cracked this a little bit, is that you can create one podcast and you can turn it into so many different forms of content. So for us, like, we record the video. I know we're recording the video now. It's nice to actually find another video podcaster. But in doing that, you create the ability to put it on YouTube. Right. Or create short video snippets and upload them on Instagram and Facebook. So the way we kind of think about podcasting now is that we want to create a great asset that we can then, I'll say, manipulate into being suitable for other platforms so that people can discover us in a variety of ways. And I love that one. Embed it on a blog post, run some paid traffic to the blog post. Another favorite of mine, I'm a really big fan of, like, video ads on Facebook ads. Yeah. So video ads on Facebook, that has been an absolute killer for us. Yeah. I love it a lot. And then another one is that if we're running traffic to these types of things, we do a lot of remarketing. Yes. So when people are hitting our assets, like, we run through and remarket into other things. And it's a much longer funnel, but we're very, very focused on podcast consumption. We want to get people addicted to our shows.
Yeah. And I think that's the other great thing about videos is that, yes, you can remarket people once they visit your website if you have all the pixels set up properly, right? But when you run video ads, it just takes a couple seconds of a viewer, and now you can appear everywhere to them, right? And you can create this audience that you can warm up. And like you said, yeah, it's a longer journey, but when you have all that set up intentionally, it's a great way to build a business and build an audience that gets engaged and turns into customers and all that kind of stuff. But let me ask you this: the video ads that you're running, are you running snippets? Are you running full episodes? What are the videos that you're putting up?
It's interesting. I think we're both in the same Facebook group, but yesterday I was in a group. Shout out to Matt and Joe, my boys, on Flowchart Facebook group.
Yeah, Hustle and Flowchart.
If they ever hear it, they'll know what that means. They've got this great big intro. But yesterday, someone posted in the group and they said, should I be making snippets for my show? So this is a snippet is when you cut a little bit from a video, so it's a little like teaser. Yep. And then you put captions over it and you run it on ads. And what I find really, really interesting in podcasting is that we're all kind of searching for like universal laws.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what you must do. And that is your path to success in podcasting. And I just think that's probably the wrong approach to take and probably the wrong thinking. And I'll explain why. I have a very unique view because we manage so many shows in so many different niches, in so many different styles. And I can tell you right now, what works for one doesn't work for another.
Yeah.
And some would work better in certain things and some would work not so good in other things. And I found this to be really, really interesting. So this is what I'll say is like, I've got shows now where it's like snippets kill it. All they do is run snippets on social and then remarket to people to watch those snippets to take them to full episodes or downloads or other content or into their business, whatever it is.
Yep.
I've got shows where the full episode, so uploading literally the full episode on Facebook.
Like
and
30, 60 minutes long.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding.
That's
and
crazy,
running that full episode crushes it. And it's like, we'll never do a snippet. Right. And then on the reverse, we've got some clients who do video shows and their video does terrible.
Huh.
It's like the audio it dominates. And like, I kid you not, we've got one show and it's the most beautiful scene. Like I've got a bit of a studio going here, but like they spent real money. I think like easy 50 G's went into just like...
okay.
The irony being that what actually works really well for them is Pinterest graphics. And which has the studio in it, but Pinterest graphics into their website crushes it.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult, and I really want to emphasize this point. It's really difficult to say like one thing works universally at all because it doesn't. That's not my experience.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is that I think the factors to take into account is mostly user behavior. So where does your audience hang out and how do they like to consume things?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I'm so glad you answered the question that way because I think like someone like Gary Vee, who has so much content out, has this huge audience, and he's doling out advice left and right to everybody. And there's people who think he's like just the god of gods and listen to everything he says. But the problem is most of his advice is given to someone who's on the other side of the camera that has nothing to do with the person watching the video. And so the context of the answer is totally different. And like, there's people going around like, oh, Gary said it, this is the way. But really it was the way for that person who Gary heard all this context about and answered something. Or maybe he didn't, and he's answering broad stroke, right? And I think that's very dangerous. So I think any advice for people, if you're watching or listening to this show, obviously you're out consuming content that's going to help you build your audience and build up your podcast and content. But like, it's so true to make sure that there's the right context around the stuff that you're following, because there is proven methods, but you just have to make sure that they're relevant to you.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I'm a big fan. Like, I like Gary Vee. I think he's done great things for the content industry. And in all honesty, when he came to Australia and promoted podcasting, like it legit helped my business. I want to do a podcast. Where's Charlie?
Yeah.
But to the point there, it's like when you look at someone like Gary Vee, he's just going so broad and on everything. I'm not confident even they know what's working the best.
Yeah.
And then I would say for the average person that doesn't have his resources, that's a terrible idea to try and replicate. I've seen so many people, I call it like Gary Fade. It's where someone's trying to be a content publisher like Gary Vee, and then they last about a month and then burn it. But I do encourage experimentation. I think a really big mistake in podcasting is like people will start a show, making some content, try 5 episodes, and maybe try a few social posts and be like, oh, didn't work.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah. I think that, that's a big thing is long, well, I don't want to say long term, but like enough consistency and commitment to know that your show will eventually get traction and be successful. So how do you advise clients to know, like, what are some questions they should be asking or metrics they should look at? Like, is this show going to eventually take off? Should I commit and go all in, or is it something we should pump the brakes and pivot on?
That's a really good question. That's a really, really good question. I'll go on a few things here that I think are important. If you're already a content maker, So you're someone who's already making some content and has some good data and can look and say, well, these topics are interesting because it's already performing to my business.
Yeah.
You're very likely to get good traction and be able to enhance a different experience. So as an example, it's like for me, I was writing some posts about podcasts on social media and they were getting a lot of traction. So I started a podcast on podcasting, funnily enough, the I said,
very meta.
Absolutely. But to go deeper on those topics, and it's doing well because it's like proven demand.
Yeah. And I like the idea, you know, you're putting out these little things on social media and they're low risk tests, right? Like how can you like, you know, the idea being like, if you're going to lose a bet, lose a small bet and then go all in and bet more as you learn and you're more confident. Right. And I think that's a good thing to do is test out, put out these ideas and see what people react to.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. The second thing I would say, though, is like, you know, not everyone has brand strength or an existing audience or anything to go. That's actually So a lot of the clients that come to us is like they're starting from scratch and they might have an idea for a show or a concept or something with there. And it's like, I'm going to tell you my biggest red flag, right? If someone comes to me with no audience, no experience in content, and it's like, I just want to make a show about the things I'm interested in. That's not going to go well. It never goes well. So we work from the idea. I'm a big fan of Gary Halbert. I think he's we're looking at starving crowd. So we take a bit of a different approach where we're like, we'll get their concept and then we'll look to see that there is actually demand for this type of content and demand for certain type of topics. And then it's almost like, I call it like a head start of going, when you're starting your show, let's buy data, make content for people that are showing they want it and the 10 most popular topics. And if that's going to get some traction, then you can have a bit of a wiggle in a play or go deeper or talk differently. But if that doesn't work and that isn't suited to you, then you very much want to reconsider it. So I've almost given up on the idea that whatever I want to talk about, my audience wants to hear. Because they don't. And I'm very much around, well, let's search out for what's important to them and serving the audience well. And then sure enough, it seems to work.
So that's a great point. I love, I'm a big fan of the quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Who knows if he actually said it or not, but if you give me 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 6 sharpening the axe, right? And it's about coming prepared. And you kind of touched on buying the data, and that's about, I imagine, running some ads to reach the right audience and see how they react to it. What are some other ways or tools that people can find out, like, is there a starving crowd, and where is that starving crowd, and how do we come up with the right topics?
Really good question. Okay, so I'll use some things. I'm going to go into like the idea, and then I'll get a little bit tactical here.
Perfect.
Okay, so when you're like trying to come up with a new show, there's really 2 mistakes you can make. You're way too different, that it's a whole new area that's never been discovered, and it's extremely high risk. Because by now, if it was a good topic to do a podcast,
someone probably did it.
Yeah. And then the other one is you copy someone else too closely, and then there's nothing unique about your show. So the idea being here is that, like, I've seen this as well, like people try and replicate Joe Rogan. This is a really common one. It's like funny how those shows don't work out, because guess what? It's already been done. Like Joe is Joe.
Yeah.
So they're the kind of like extremes. You're way too different. There's no interest. It's not going to work. And then you're way too similar. There's no reason to listen to your show. And you're trying to strike the balance of the middle. So, for example, we'll use Joe Rogan as the example because I think he's commonly known, and I think a lot of people kind of know about him. If you loved Joe's show and you were looking to create something similar, the thing you've got to ask about is, like, how's your show going to be different? Like, you might want to serve the same audience, but what are they not getting from Joe? Like, how are they going to be different to Joe? So you might sit here and say, well, Joe does these 3-hour episodes. We're going to do half-an-hour episodes. So it's going to be similar topics, but we're going to condense them. So for people that don't have that 3 hours, we're going to make it different there. The other thing might be is that, Joe might cover, I know he covers like fighting, comedy, politics, like everything.
Yeah.
You might pick like 3 of them. So you might say, well, I'm just going to do like the science type stuff, or I'm going to do the fighting type stuff. So you can see that you can build a different style from there. And that's certainly one way to think about it. For other ways, and this is probably more of my favorite, if you go to, there's 2 resources I love. One is iTunes and one is Chartable. You can actually see.
Okay, that's new for me.
Yeah, Chartable is, I think, a fantastic database where you can actually see what shows are doing well and what episodes on those shows are doing well. And that'll give you a pretty big hint to kind of what's already working. And again, we're not looking to copy, but this is something where you can walk away modeling something from.
Yeah, they took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say modeling there. So that's great. And you mentioned, making content that you're interested in yourself is one of the big mistakes that you see. Another mistake I see people make is they create content that might actually be popular. They maybe did research and it looked popular, but the problem is they built the wrong audience that doesn't align with whatever they're ultimately selling. So for instance, an accountant who creates a podcast and they're talking about things that other accountants are interested in. So they actually they see that, okay, these topics are popular, and then there's an audience here, and then they actually they start building an audience, and then they say, well, okay, we're getting downloads, but we're not getting any sales, so podcasting doesn't work, right? Do you see, how do you help people combat that where they just end up building an audience of their peers versus who they're trying to target?
This is a really common one as well. I got to tell you right now is that the podcasting industry has a downloads obsession, and it's the wrong track.
Yeah.
It's the wrong metric. It's a secondary metric. It's a nice metric, but for me, I like tracking profit. Like that really helps what is working or not working.
Yeah.
So, I think first off, we've got to frame out. I think a lot of podcasters get obsessed with downloads and chase downloads, and then eventually get to a point where they're like, no one wants to buy anything. Like, people aren't interested in my stuff. Like, I don't have a big podcast or a big list compared to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I'll guarantee my profit per person on my list or per subscriber is really up there. I would rival a lot of them just due to how well I've built this audience and how in line it is with what we do.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it from there. But we're going to have to use like an imaginary Venn diagram, if you will, which I'm a really big fan of this. So I want you to imagine there's 3 circles. Mm-hmm. So the first circle is that is in line with your business. So we'll use an accountant. So if you're an accountant and you're wanting to get clients out of your podcast, you're wanting to use this to convert clients, then the stuff you have to talk about on your podcast must be in line with your business for that ideal client. So that's circle number 1. Circle number 2 is that the stuff you talk about on your podcast must solve the problems and improve the lives of that audience. So it's like, as you said from there, is like, if you're just talking about why Xero is better than QuickBooks, they don't really care about that. They want to know how you can help them make more money,
right?
Or how they can help them deal with a tax issue or a payroll issue. Mm-hmm. Like, you've got to really shape your content to, again, in line with the business, and then actually problem solve, improve their lives, make their lives better. Give them that when they finish listening to your episode, they're like, yeah, I'm better off for this experience.
Yeah.
And here's the last one, which is very, very relevant to accountants, is your show has to be, I call it infotaining.
Yes.
Or entertaining. Now, I'll tell a quick story with this one. I'm actually the world's worst speller. I can't spell very well at all. And
that makes you a good podcaster because you just have to talk, right?
This is funny. I actually have someone on my team who's my official spell checker because I'm that bad at it. But the point being, maths, I'm like crazy good. Mm-hmm. I'm really, really good at maths, and like Excel is my jam. Like, give me a spreadsheet and I will knock it out of the park. And
I've always people will say that Excel is their jam, so I got to give you props on that.
We all have gifts. But like I am notoriously the person where it's like I'd put a post up on Facebook and like people would just comment with what was spelling wrong and like miss the context. This sucks so much, and it really used to hurt me. Since improved and done some training on that, which is great. But I've always asked myself, like, why? Why is it like, I mean, there's nothing, I don't believe, genetically inclined for me to be better at one or the other. Like, what's happened here? How am I so bad at this and so good at this? And I mean, it's ironic. And I look back and I go, in year 7 and 8 in school, so this is when I was about 13, 14, I had the best maths teacher ever. He was the most entertaining storyteller. Every maths lesson he brought, he had a real-world example. It was funny, and I crushed it because I loved being in that class.
Yeah.
And then on the reverse of that, in my English class, I actually had a teacher that was hanging out for retirement. She did not care in the slightest what went on. And I just really couldn't believe what an impact that had on my life. Yeah. And I would even question you here, do you find, if you were to think about who were the good teachers or the good classes, has that transition to what you're better at or worse at in adult life.
Yeah, totally.
Now, I have a son, a little son, Jack, and I know you've got a little Bubs as well.
Yep.
It's made me very, very concerned about schooling now because I'm like, oh.
Well, that's actually, it's a good sign that maybe we can use to raise them, because then we can say, who's your favorite teacher? And then the subjects that they don't like the teacher, we know that's where we need to bump them a little bit more, right?
Absolutely. But it's just to my point here is that if you think of your podcast as like you are that class in school for something,
yeah.
If you're the one that's really entertaining, your audience is going to want to hang around and come back for it. And I always say is like, you want to be like Game of Thrones addictive. Like that's what you're after, is like, you want people like, when's that next episode? I can't believe they did that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like my English teacher, and I won't name her just in case she ever does see this.
Yeah, I heard she's a big fan of Zeotag, so.
She might be. But the point, that's very much where we look at these three diagrams. And I'll just recap. In line with business, solves problems and improves the lives of our audience, but then has an infotaining or entertaining element. And when you can mesh that, boom. Like that's the sweet spot. That's when things really get interesting.
Yeah. So when a show like a Game of Thrones or any of these binge crazy shows that are out, they're episodic and there's cliffhangers and they move on, back and forth. So how do you advise your clients when they're creating podcast episodes to create that same kind of binge worthiness that gets them excited for that next episode?
That's a really good question. So when I say infotaining or entertaining, and we use the example we just used, I've seen people take this the wrong way entirely, and they think that they need to be Game of Thrones,
right?
Like with the cliffhangers. And that's, don't get me wrong, I think it can be really great to let your audience know what's coming next. But did you know there's people that don't like Game of Thrones? They actually just love documentaries.
Yeah.
Like they love to watch a good, informative documentary. And there's some people that don't watch TV at all. They'll only read books. So the thing I would say is that form of addictiveness needs to be in line with your audience. So if you have a podcast on Game of Thrones, definitely do the stuff Game of Thrones have. That's what the audience is into. But if you're someone, let's say this accountant, those types of cliffhangers or things like that probably won't have the same effect that you're intending, and I think might be more effort than they are for you. Where it's like, if coming back to this, it's about the way you talk on the podcast. And I'll give you a really good example in the way of the accountant. This recent update in the tax break is letting business owners kind of come in here and they might be able to see a 0.2% gain across the board on their. So if I come on and I talk about that as an accountant, your show is going to do terribly.
Right. Yeah.
But if I come on and say, guys, this month, change in government is going to make you more money. So let's break it down. If you are a small business owner and you trade at over 100 grand revenue, what this means is there's going to be 2% more in your pocket if you do this. So this is why you need to be aware of this and how you can take advantage. We're going to get into the how. So when we get, and you can see that I've made it entertaining.
Yeah, totally. And I think the Venn diagram is super important for everyone to keep in mind too, where don't listen to this and say, oh, I have to be super entertaining and then forget about the problem solving part, right? Because I think there's people who go so far into that where they try to be entertaining, and even if they are successful, they forgot to solve problems, and now there's misalignment with what the business objectives are for the show.
Absolutely. And I won't say that these are all need to be treated equally, but that's a fantastic starting place.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I look at this and you might say, well, I'm actually weaker at the entertainment part. But that's okay. But it's like you've got to have all elements. And like if you really want to see magic, like you really, really want your podcast to do it, the problems you want to solve on your show are like the bleeding neck problems.
Right.
If you can push on the trigger of someone's like, oh, my neck's bleeding and they need a hospital, they will gravitate towards your solution. So like aim for the big problems, the urgent problems that need to be solved. You can't leave a bleeding neck for too long.
Right.
So that's a little hint there as well, but definitely have some balance.
Yeah. So when you take on clients and they have a show and it's just like they want to get to the next level, what are some quick wins that you see have like a big impact for people out of the gate? Like, hey, here's the easy stuff that got overlooked that's going to make your show, have a greater impact, and then we can look at longer term stuff. Yeah,
that's a really good question. So I'll give you some common ones. Like consistency is number one. So it's like an easy win is if a show like does an episode one week and not the next, and then maybe 5 in the following week. Like getting some weekly consistency and routine is often like really well done. And that doesn't just apply to the show, but like promotion of the show. So getting a really good pattern where every week you're releasing an episode and then you're promoting it well on the platforms it should be on. I'll come back to promotion because there's some good ones there. But then the second thing I really look at is the content, and we've discussed the content there a lot. Quite often, this is really, really common, and no one wants to hear this because it's not the sexy answer, Facebook hack, how to game Google, that I wish I had for you, but it's just crap. What we look at then is like, are you very much in line with what I spoke about here, my Venn diagram? Because if you've got an audience and we just get you to twist the knife on a few of their problems, like your show could explode without any extra work.
Yeah.
It's just really tweaking up and making sure that the content itself carries the show. Yeah. So that would be like my starting point. Then we do look at some of the promotional stuff. And this is a really interesting one because we'll go back to the start. It's like there's no universal one way that works best for any show. But I tend to find that most shows haven't explored ideas enough, or they are not aware of the different ways they could be doing it. So number one, email. So if you have an email list and you're not using it well, or you've got you're growing a list and just not telling them about your podcast, it's free to send them an email. It's free. It's actually it's nothing to improve your show. And then we start looking at like what's the way your audience would think about content a little bit differently. So I'll give you some examples here. This accountant that we've been hypothetically working on,
Yep.
I would probably step up his LinkedIn game. Like that's one where I'd go, okay, we can pretty well see that if you're an accountant dealing with a more serious topic, LinkedIn is going to be the one where we might put some more effort, design some content suitable for LinkedIn, and push a bit harder there. If you're a fitness show, Instagram and Facebook, like you should be doubling down on those immensely. Because like they tend to be the platforms where they hang out. Now this is where the interesting ones. If you're in like a hacker community, if you're in like I would say like Reddit is really, really undervalued. So if you're
Reddit scares me. So if you have some tips on there, because I honestly I'm not even scared from any previous scars because I don't even want to touch it. I respect their passion and enthusiasm too much to try and infiltrate from a marketing perspective. So how do you go on with your tips? But I'm very excited to hear.
Yeah, so this is one that is very, very misunderstood, number one. And then two is that if you haven't used it and you get on there, it is scary. So I'll describe why it's scary first. So number one, Reddit, you don't have to put your name or photo in. So like it's anonymous. It's an anonymous platform. And that is what people are very, very different behind a keyboard when there's no repercussions. So that's why it's an interesting place. But Reddit is this phenomenal thing where it's like everything is effectively like forums and sub-forums. So people really identify what they're into. So you can find some really obscure niches in here. So doomsday preppers. I love the doomsday preppers. But like, obviously, like it's such a big platform now. I think it's one of the biggest websites in the world, but there's these really, really interesting subgroups. So like if you're in camping, doomsday prepping, parenting's a really good one on there, believe it or not, because a lot of parents want to ask questions, but they don't want their name attached.
Right.
Hey, I just dropped my toddler. What should I do? It's not something you...
Yeah, I don't want that tied back to my Facebook profile.
Yeah, but if you think of it like I suppose the best way to think about it is it's like Facebook groups, but at another level, where the whole thing is effectively a group system. Yeah. Now, the best way I can say, if you're a podcast host and you're not using Reddit and you're like, hey, maybe I should check this out. Like one, go in and search for relevant groups and just have a look. Like don't post anything. Like read through and look at how people are behaving and really experience that. And then two, be helpful. Be helpful. Don't be spammy. Because if you be spammy, you will get crushed. And I'll say, well, the next question I always get here is like, well, how do you promote a podcast in there as well? And the idea being that, well, if you're being helpful and you've recorded podcasts on the topics and questions they've got in the group, then answering those threads and putting things forward is being helpful. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a more involved strategy.
Yeah, and that ties back into the how do you find topics that are proven to be of interest, right? So now we uncover that going into Reddit, into the subreddits of your target audience, you can dig up those questions ahead of time, bring on a guest who's an expert, get their expertise, go back into that subreddit. You could write out the answer, and then maybe at the end, and I'm speculating here because I'm not a Redditor, write out the answer and say, this was great advice I got from Charlie about how to improve your podcast. Here's a bunch of tips, tip. And then at the bottom say, if you want to check out the whole episode, you can see it on my blog here. Is that a safe thing to do?
It is, but I'll put one more thing in. If you're going to play in Reddit, like, you always got to be able to back your claims up. So proof.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've got, like, I mean, come on, like, my company deals with more than a million downloads a month.
Yeah.
On podcasts. Like, I might have an idea of what gets downloads. But it's like, I've put some things up that I know work and have been crucified. And I'm like, just post the screenshot.
Right.
Here you go.
There you go. Yeah.
And like, that dissolves it. So just beware if you put in unfounded claims or anything like that, you will cop a hiding. But I don't want to paint it that way. It's actually like, once you're on the inside of Reddit and you're a part of one of these groups and community, it's fantastic. Like, it really, really is a very great place. And I've met some really good people on there.
Yeah. So someone's got their quick wins, and I think a misconception maybe is, I've been publishing a show a lot, and we committed to 3 months, and we did 3 months every week, and it produced no business results, and profit is our KPI, or lead generation is our KPI, and we didn't really get there. So, we're going to can this podcasting thing. And I think the misconception is the publish and pray, right? And that they just published the episode, but they didn't notice, well, we didn't promote it at all. So there was like 3 viewers or downloads, and they all work at our company, or it's somebody's mom. And so rather than saying podcasting doesn't work, it's actually your podcast is there and it might be great, but you need to make sure that you're getting enough views. So in all the different sized podcasts that you work with, all different businesses, is there like a minimum viable audience size that we want to say, like, okay, we've been running for 3 months, we haven't generated any leads. Is there, what's the indicator prior to leads that we can look at and say, well, we didn't get any views, so the problem is that we need more views before we can be confident that the podcast won't generate leads? Are there any kind of numbers or suggestions you have for people in that kind of area?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a whole bunch of stuff here. Like, we've got really good documentation on this. So like, I've taken over existing shows that have been at that stage, and then I've also started many shows from scratch. So like, and in different niches, wild niches, I've seen a lot of different stuff. And I'll give you, there are some universals that do remain interesting. There's no universals in promotion though. Yeah. Number one is, if you are finding that, it's likely you didn't do your pre-work. It's very, very likely that you didn't understand who was the audience, what their problems are. It's very, very likely that that's a key fundamental. Yeah,
so picking the wrong topics.
Yeah, and the way I say it is that if you are building a podcast audience and it's not as angry as vegans, then you probably didn't run enough. Yeah, but again, like, I know I always say that as my little joke. I actually, I'm for the vegans. I think they're doing great things to the planet. Like, there's people out there right now, I cannot believe this exists. There's people that are carnivores, just eating meat. And there's people that are vegans, and they're kind of warring at each other. Yeah. And I go, like, what an amazing audience building and tribe building type experiment. And I go, wow. And like, fitness is the same. We've got these like
keto or paleo or.
And again, I have no view on these topics. I'm not pretending I do. I don't do any of these things to have a view. But like, when you look at how passionate their audience is for their topic, like, that's what you're looking to create in a podcast audience. It's polarizing. Yeah. If you're trying to please everyone, you're probably going to have a very hard time. Yeah. So for me, I'll happily say, like, direct response is shit house. Don't do that. Do a podcast. If you're doing direct response, you're a loser, all right? I'm telling you now.
But that brings up a good point, because there's 2 things in that. One, having a core value that you can rally these people around so they feel like they're part of the tribe. Like, yeah, these are my people and this is what I love. And then there's the other side of it where you're creating a quote-unquote common enemy that you can team up against, right? And that's how you create a polarization around a topic, is having that rallying cry around a core value of some kind, and then creating something else that you're opposed to together, right? And that's what you're talking about here.
And it's fascinating that most people have those, they just don't make them shine. But that's, right. I suppose, viewing here is that, for this accountant we've hypothetically been working on, he will have ways and things and views that he's for that maybe someone else isn't, but he needs to highlight that.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you actually give people a reason to discriminate in your favor.
Right. Let's say, this hypothetical accountant we're talking to is looking for small business clients and business owners. And so he could very easily create his rallying cry around the power of the small business owner and the startup entrepreneur. And, big corporations don't understand how this kind of thing works. And they're the ones making different types of tax breaks and et cetera, et cetera. And so now you have your rallying cry around the passion and empowerment of small business and startup entrepreneurs. And you have this enemy of corporate, or maybe it's, the government is trying to take all your money, but we're going to help you get it back. And it's those are things that are right in plain sight, but maybe just when you don't think about it in the way that we're talking right now, they're not articulated to create the value for our accountant podcaster.
I might do an accounting podcast after this discussion. I think we've outlined a lot. But this is really true. So bringing this back to the topic is the pre-work.
Yeah.
Have you actually picked a good niche or audience that you want to work with and is your ideal client? And then have you aligned my Sven diagram of creating content that is that bleeding neck problem in line with your business, solves problems and improves the lives of the audience and is entertaining? Yeah. If you're doing all that, right, then I'm really confident that the show is going to do well over time.
Yeah. But it's going to do well. It's going to do well if people watch it, right? So if we are consistently publishing, we have a good plan, but we've had 10 episodes with 7 total viewers, right? That's not enough to really say that the podcast could or couldn't work for lead gen or sales, right? So is there a baseline of number of viewers and how to solve for that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we dig into content's good. Now we've got to look at promotion.
Yeah.
Because it's otherwise you're just promoting crap and it won't do well. So we look at the promotion and we look at the views and we say, well, did they actually make an effort? Did they actually consistently promote the show well, or were they excited for episode 1 and 2 and then thought it would take a life of its own?
Right.
Say that coyly, but I have seen that numerous times. Yeah. So that's something we'll look at there. Now, if someone's been doing this show for a while and none of the promotion stuff is hitting, then it's looking at, okay, we'll go back to this audience. Where are they spending their time? And what can we do to really get this out there? So a couple I really love is going, okay, well, this is likely where you might introduce some paid. So quick little win strategy is find the platform, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Google, LinkedIn, whatever it is. Let's put a little bit of money behind this show and see if we can hit this audience and gain something out of it. And then the other one, and this is my little trick as well, is that if you're a podcast host, go on other podcasts that are in this space, because then that will contaminate or cross-pollinate the audience between it. So it's likely that they haven't been doing that well enough either if a show's at a dismal level. Yeah. So mix in some paid on the right channels to give it a kickstart, and then get on other shows that have a similar audience or part of your audience so you can cross-pollinate, and then even bring some of those hosts on your show to cross-pollinate again, and then that will give you a bit of a jump start.
Yeah, and I think another good tip too is that, there's other metrics to look at where you could be looking and saying, on the surface level, it looks like creating a podcast, our metric is leads or sales or whatever from our viewers. But then there's the other side of you and I right now, we're kicking off a friendship here. And all of a sudden, if you look at, like you said, bringing on other peers, where podcasting could be a business development tool where maybe it has nothing to do with the actual viewers anyway, but it has to do with the relationships you're able to build and people you're able to talk to because you're hosting a show that gives them a platform.
Oh, so now we open up an interesting topic. We have a client, I kid you not, I have a client, and they do not care if anyone watches their show at all. At all. But if they get 0 downloads, it's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to this guy, lovely guy, but do you know what? When he invites people on the show, he'll either do a JV, have them become a client, or we'll get access to an event, he'll speak out, and then through those opportunities, crushes it.
Yeah.
So it's my podcast is not a tool for discovery or even for content marketing. Mm-hmm. It's actually a platform for me to get access to the people I want to get access to it, because if I ask to have a coffee with someone, they're like, no chance.
Right.
But if I ask someone on the podcast, they're like all for it. And not only that, they'll spend an hour telling me all their secrets.
Right. Exactly. And then, then there's the added benefit of then helping amplify. And of course, when you approach something, when you approach a relationship, you want to be adding value for them. So you do give them the platform, But and I think, you know, that's an overlooked opportunity. I think a lot of podcasters have on the table, or even a good reason for businesses to get started with a podcast and get value before the long-term traction takes off, right? Where, all right, we want to commit to having a successful podcast with an audience that's engaged, that does turn into leads, that does turn into sales, but we know that's going to take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, for us to gain that traction. And so in the meantime, here are some quicker wins we can get. And that's creating relationships with guests that we bring on the show, you know, using paid ads to create thought leadership in the space and all that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of quick wins that can help you get past that initial struggle before you get that organic traction and the escape velocity that a lot of people are looking for.
Definitely. I would agree with that a lot, and I like the way you framed that up. I think it's really cool. And my friend Daryl says to me, like, when it comes to building an audience, you can either buy, build, or borrow.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you're spending all the time on the build in the beginning and you're not buying any and you're not borrowing any, it's a much slower approach. And if you're up for that, that's fine. But if you're not, right, you got to lean into those other options.
Right.
And I think it's really important. But I want to give your audience some like more universal stuff that I think does. We generally see once a show passes 1,000 downloads a week, is like, it's a very noticeable impact. You will feel the power of your podcast, where you're reaching enough people consistently where it's like, okay, it's doing something special for us. Mm-hmm. We generally find, like, this is a very one, but it's like, it is reasonable if you're doing things right that you will be able to get traction in your show after 3 months. Like, 3 months is a reasonable expectation, and we've already had this conversation. If not getting traction, it might be that you're building it more slowly. The size isn't there. It might take you up to 6, but it might be that you're missing some of the elements we've discussed before.
Yeah.
Probably need to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great numbers. And so as we wrap up, one last question before I tell people where to find you. You know, what's one thing that you wish all podcasters knew when they were really trying to get serious about it?
That is such a good question. What's one thing I wish people knew? All right, I'm going to say this. The most important thing, right, and I cannot stress this enough, is the words that come out of your mouth. It's not the social strategies. It's not the microphones. It's not the fancy lights. Like, that isn't the stuff that at the core does well. Like, universally, the shows that are the most successful are the ones that put the effort and thought into the words that are coming out of the person's mouth or the guest's mouth.
Yeah. This is the substance, right? The substance of the content really being at the core of everything. And I couldn't agree more.
We have a show, I kid you not, right? It's a huge show, huge. This guy does like over 100,000 downloads a month, easily. Wow. And it sounds like crap. It's like terrible. And he won't buy a new mic because he's like, why would I?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that he has nailed a tribe and people that want to hear from him, and like they are on the edge of their seats to get that next piece of content from him. Yeah,
and you know, I know I said that was the last question, but I want to riff a little bit on this idea. And you mentioned Gary Halbert before, and we've talked about direct response and this content substance. Like, you know, and when it comes to marketing and lead generation, like, we're running very successful campaigns for Zeotag, where some people might call our landing page very ugly, right? But it's the message and value that we're offering people for what they exchanged for their signing up for an account that is skyrocketing. And we have a cold traffic conversion rate of 50%, which is, like, you know, unheard of for most people. And
do not touch anything.
Exactly, right? So, like, I'm not, you know, like, we don't need to bring a designer in to improve this. Like, we're leaving it as is. And so with that, and I think it seems like you and I both have this direct response background, and I would guess that you're a big Dan Kennedy fan as well. And how much of that, how much value comes from the direct response world and understanding the importance of the message and just getting started out there, do you think comes into play? And maybe what are some other, like, cross-training skill sets that people could have that would help them be better at podcasting?
It's a really good one. Honestly, copywriting would be my number one. I think that I love, ironically, I can't spell, as I've mentioned in here.
Well, you know, I was going to say before when you said about the typos and stuff, is that personally, I don't really care about typos. And when I'm sending emails, and a couple of my businesses, we have tens of thousands of subscribers, and I'm putting stuff out, and there's probably a typo in every one of the emails I send out. But people respond to them, right? They're signing up, they're joining, they're doing whatever. And you know, that's why with that tedious, like, I don't care about beautiful design unless it's causing an issue. I don't necessarily care about typos and getting into those details as long as the substance is there and the message matches the audience.
So it's a really interesting topic. It's such an interesting one. So even to I personally write a weekly email to my list. Like, I always write about copy, but I do have someone else proof it and fix it up from there.
Yeah, and I love those emails. So everybody definitely sign up for that. He sends out great stuff.
Something I've been really putting some effort into. I love my as I said, the irony of someone who can't spell loving writing. I laugh at it all the time. But the point coming back to here is, like, if you're looking for a skill to pick up that will make you a better podcast host, I really think it's copywriting. Yeah. And I'll put a spin on it is, like, you've got to think of, like, each episode you create is almost a sales letter, except you're not selling direct to a service or product. You're selling someone on listening to your show again. You're creating something here where the idea is going, right, that was so good, I'm in for next week.
Yeah.
And if you think about it from that construct instead of, like, put your credit card in, you can do really well. But the thinking that goes into writing a great piece of copy is almost the same that goes into creating a really good podcast episode. And I think that if you were going to work on, like, one thing as a skill that universally worked with being a podcast host, that would be my number one. And then the added advantage of that is it would help you make better social posts. It would help you write better emails to your lists. It would help you write better show notes. So, like, it really, it's a very, very domino skill set for podcasts.
Yeah. And I think it's a great domino skill set. I use that domino word a lot when I talk about this stuff. And I think it's a great skill set for anybody in content or marketing or sales, or really even just improving communication, you know. All right, so that's bringing us to the end here. Charlie, I can't thank you enough. There's so much value in this episode for everybody to take their podcast to the next level. So if they're looking for improvement, you know, where can they find you, and how do you help people, and how can they work with you?
Yeah, great question. So number one is that I have a podcast that just talks about podcasting. So it's called The Business of Podcasting, and we talk about a lot of the stuff we spoke about on the show today. So if you do want to hear more from me on these topics, please come and check that out. The second thing is I write a weekly email. So every week I write an email. I do a lot of storytelling, and my basic idea of writing this email is I want to help people have a better podcast. Yeah. So if you want to get that email from me, you can head over to Vela Media and have a look at Podcaster's Edge. It'll be in the menu, I'm sure. And I'll sure to give you a link as well, Todd, if you want to link people to there. Yep. And we've got templates and frameworks. So if you want to have a look at, like, you know, how to make an intro or whatever it is, they're all on the site as well. And then lastly is that we are a business that helps people make great podcasts. So if someone did want to build or grow a show with us, we do all the production side of things and then also help with the publishing and promotion. So that's our media side where we directly work on people's shows.
Great. Awesome. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for watching and listening. If you made it this far, you're obviously someone who's interested in podcasting. So check out Charlie and go get your free Zeotag account at zeotag.com to help improve the optimization of your episodes on your website. And we will catch you on the next episode.